Today we are going to start with Minimum Wages Act 1948. The year of this act is same as that of Factories Act. Act is also of the year 1948. So in both the acts you have to remember one year, that is 1948, and you can relate it by saying that these two acts relates to 1 year after the year in which we get independence. The year in which we got independence was 1947, and the year for the Minimum Wages Act and Factories Act is 1948. So we will start with the object and scope of the legislation. So the first object of this legislation is to prevent exploitation of labor. And so how can it prevent the exploitation of labor? As the name suggests, Minimum Wages Act is the minimum wages. Wages is more of a term that is used for labor. The payment we make to any employee is called as salary, and when it is made to any worker, then it is called as wages. So the aim of this act is to prevent exploitation by securing a minimum wage. That is, the employer has to pay them a minimum amount of money for their work. Since in India there is large scale of unemployment, people agree to work for wages which are not sufficient to sustain a life. Therefore, in order to prevent exploitation, it is necessary that some minimum amount of wage is provided to everyone. So as the laborer can sustain their life. However, it is very sad to know that the minimum guaranteed amount is usually very less as compared to what is required to live a proper life. And India being an underdeveloped country, there is large scale unemployment. People agree to work on amount which can be very less according to the work they do. And India being a welfare state, it is the country's responsibility to make sure that everybody who is living in the country earns a minimum amount of money when they work. So this act is only in relation to those type of employment that are listed in the schedule of the act. What is the schedule? Schedule is a list, or you can say a table is usually attached to an act which lists certain employments. So minimum wages, it's not provided for every kind of work that is done, but only in those employments which are listed in the schedule of the act. There is a list attached to the act, and there are certain certain categories which are listed and on which the Minimum Wages Act operates. Now we are coming to the definition part, and we would be covering some major definitions like what is appropriate government in relation to this act. So okay, what is appropriate government? We would come across this definition in various acts. That is because for every act there is delegation of power either to the central government or to the state government. Like in the Factories Act, the appropriate government or the government who had the major control over the functioning of the act, over the taking care of other stuff in the act, was state government. But in Minimum Wages Act 1948, there are certain categories of work for which the appropriate government, that is the government that is responsible for those certain employment, is central government. While for other scheduled employment, the appropriate government is the state government. So, in relation to railways, mines, oil field, and corporation that are established by the central government, the appropriate government is the central government. Therefore, if anybody is working in railway, mines, etc., then the central government is responsible to make sure that the minimum wages act is applied to the railways, mines, and oil field and other stuff. Okay, while in relation to any other scheduled employment is what? Scheduled employment is those employments which are listed in the schedule of the act, that is given with the act, that these are the employments which would be governed under the minimum wages act. So in relation to any other scheduled employment, that is in relation to any employment other than railway, mines, oil field, and corporation established by the central government, the uh, the appropriate government would be state government. Okay, so I have listed this RMOC. In case you have any problem in remembering the appropriate government, always remember in relation to RMOC, the appropriate government is central government, while in relation to any other scheduled employment, the appropriate government is the state government.